Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the LiftAffect podcast. I am your host, Matt McNeil, founder, clinical director, and director of human performance at LiftAffect, where we assist professional pilots with maintaining better mental health and optimizing their mental skills. The goal of this podcast is simple: to help pilots and other high liability professionals and disciplines come out of the shadows to discover how we can live better lives personally and professionally. Join us each episode as we discuss various topics ranging from mental health, mental skills and performance, to business, entrepreneurship, and a few other surprises along the way.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the LiftAffect podcast. I'm your host, Carl Keller, along with the main man, as always, Matt McNeil. Matt, how you doing, buddy?
I am doing. That's what I'm doing. How are you doing?
I'm doing plus.
You're doing plus?
Yeah,
plus
I'm
one
doing
or minus one?
We'll go with a plus one today.
You're in a plus one. I think I will just call it a plus one. You know what happened to me this morning? I took my daughter to school, like running around, trying to get her to go. It's really cold here. I took her to school and we pull into the parking lot and there's nobody there. And I'm like, what is going on? So I call my wife. I'm like, are they having school today? And she's like, oh shit. It's a 90-minute delay. She checks her email. I'm like, oh God. So like drive home and I taught her, she's like, well, where are we going? Why are we going in? I'm like, because they're delaying school. So that's how my day started, which is just awesome. Because I'm stupid and didn't check my email. But other than that, that's what's going on.
It's going to be 80 or 81 here today. It's just, this is insanity. And tomorrow it's going to be back down to freezing. So this has not been a winter for us. But
no, man, no.
Yeah, it's just this is kind of weird weather all over the country.
Yeah.
You know, we had one of our listeners wrote in and basically wanted to take you up on your offer that you had mentioned in one of our previous podcasts, which was that you would do some book reviews about some good books for people that would help them.
Okay.
So I'm going to throw you a curveball today and say, you know what? On the cuff, throw me do a book review or two for our listeners that you might think would have value for them, because you said you have notes for it. So
yeah,
I'm
I got
just
lots
throw
of
the
notes.
floor to you. And
oh man, now you're putting me on the spot. What the hell are we going to talk about? Which book are we going to do? Well, okay, let's see. Last week we talked about sleep, benefits of sleep, right?
Yep.
That's what we talked about. We did get a couple questions about sleep, but we can maybe answer those next time. If you want to do a book review, let's do. So one of the books I think I mentioned is a book called Why We Sleep by a guy named Matthew Walker. Should we talk about that? I've read that book a couple times. I've got probably 25 pages of notes.
This is kind of, we're free forming today.
Okay. Let me pull up a couple things here because I don't have all this memorized. I don't have all my notes memorized. Okay, Why We Sleep. Let's look through some of my stuff. I tend to pull a lot of quotes from books that I think are really important. Let me start with this one. This is a couple paragraphs from Why We Sleep. The subtitle is Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. Like I said before, sleep is the foundation. It's not just a pillar. It's the foundation for everything else. So if you're not getting good sleep, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to get the benefits of a good of exercise and the benefits of nutrition, and it's going to be difficult for you to stay healthy if you're not getting good sleep.
And if I remember correctly, most of the people that come to see you, that is an underlying theme. So it's a
95%. It's the sleep goes, and then that's where the house of cards just crumbles. It just falls apart. Because again, the foundation cracks, right? What happens to the house? You can have the best walls in the world. You can have the best fixtures and it's going to start to fall and crack, and you're going to get big, things aren't going to start to work. That's what sleep is like. So here's a quote. I'm just going to read this to you because this felt really important to me when I read this book. So this is a quote from Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. A balanced diet and exercise are of vital importance, yes, but we now see sleep as the preeminent force in this health trinity. The physical and mental impairments caused by one night of bad sleep dwarf those caused by an equivalent absence of food or exercise. It is difficult to imagine any other state, naturally or medically manipulated, that affords a more powerful, redressing physical and mental health at every level of analysis. Based on a rich new scientific understanding of sleep, we no longer have to ask what sleep is good for. Instead, we are now forced to wonder whether there are any biological functions that do not benefit from a good night's sleep. So far, the results of thousands of studies insist that no, there aren't. Emerging from this research renaissance is an unequivocal message. Sleep is the single most effective thing we can do to reset our brain and body health each day. Mother Nature's best effort yet at contra death. Unfortunately, the real evidence that makes clear all the dangers that befall individuals and societies when sleep becomes short have not been clearly telegraphed to the public. It is the most glaring omission in the contemporary health conversation. In response, this book is intended to serve as a scientifically accurate intervention addressing this unmet need, and what I hope is a fascinating journey of discovery. It aims to revise our cultural appreciation of sleep and reverse our neglect of it. So that's kind of from the introduction of this book. Well, what are your thoughts on that? So I read that to you.
I believe it because I know what sleep or the lack thereof, or when and not just one day but multiple days, what it does to you throughout the day. So that I feel like there's a very clear connection between those things.
Right.
So yes, it's a real thing, and everybody knows it. But I don't know that I would have ever thought that it was more detrimental than lack of good food and good exercise.
Right. It dwarfs food and exercise like astronomically.
Is there some sort of I don't want to say formula that basically, because everybody's different, and it may be at different points in their life, where okay, I really need to get this amount of sleep compared to someone else that says, hey, I need 8 hours, I need 6, or 6 is good for you, 8's good for you. How is there a way for them to figure that out? Or you just
there are studies that you can do. You can actually get formal sleep studies, which there's no reason to go do that unless you've got a sleep problem. There is kind of a magic number, but a lot of it is going to come down to like your own sort of biorhythms and how you feel. And there's some rudimentary kind of self-tests you can do, and you can play around with it. But I think first is just start to like observe how you actually feel. When do you go to sleep, and how did your sleep, from your own evaluation of it, how was your night's sleep? Was it disrupted? Was it good? Did you dream? Did you not? Do you feel rested when you wake up? Do you not feel rested? I use something called an Aura ring, OURA. It's got sensors in it, and it tracks actually sleep stages. It tracks your heart rate. It tracks your heart rate variability, HRV. So there's all these other biological factors that you can look at to determine whether you're getting a good night's sleep or not. What I like about this ring is it actually kind of learns over time. It learns how you sleep, and it figures out where your baseline is and whether you veer on the plus or the minus side of that baseline. So it's a pretty cool device.
Well, getting back to the book.
Yeah. But getting back to the book.
I won't let you get too far down the rabbit hole. What were some key takeaways?
Take homes. Yeah, key takeaways. One is sleep is universal. Here's a quote. I pull quotes where I feel like the take homes are. He writes, without exception, every animal species studied to date sleeps or engages in something remarkably like it. This includes insects such as flies, bees, cockroaches, and scorpions, fish from small perch to larger sharks, amphibians such as frogs, and reptiles such as turtles, Komodo dragons, and chameleons. All have a bona fide sleep. Ascend the evolutionary ladder further, and we find all types of birds and mammals sleep, from shrews to parrots, kangaroos, polar bears, bats, and of course, we humans. Sleep is universal. So I think that's an important take home, is that biologically, to be alive, sleep is, and if you think about sleep, it's kind of this absurd thing that we do because it makes you vulnerable, and it makes you're not actually, what we would define as productive when you're asleep, but biologically, every species has to do it.
It's regenerative.
We have to sleep. It's regenerative. Well, that's the benefits of it. Under behind the curtain is one of the benefits of it. So sleep is universal. There's another concept that he talks about, which is baseline resetting. Here's a quote that demonstrates that. This is like the discerning quote that, to summarize this section. Individuals fail to recognize how their perennial state of sleep efficiency has come to compromise their mental aptitude and physical vitality, including the slow accumulation of ill health. A link between the former and latter is rarely made in their mind. Based on epidemiological studies of average sleep time, millions of individuals unwittingly spend years of their life in a suboptimal state of psychological and physiological functioning, never maximizing their potential of mind or body due to their blind persistence in sleeping too little. 60 years of scientific research prevents me from accepting anyone who tells me that he or she can get by on just 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night just fine. So I used to be that guy, is I can sleep 4 hours, I'm good. I prided myself on that. I don't need sleep. When my wife always gives me shit about it because she was always like, "You're stupid. You're an idiot." Because I was like, I don't need sleep. I get 4 hours, 5 hours. And I was like, I could just hammer myself through it, no issues. And I was dead wrong. The research shows that nobody, I don't care who you are, and I deal with a lot of CEOs and stuff that they've bought into that thing of, I don't need to get a lot of sleep because I'm too busy and I know how to, it's bullshit. You cannot get by on that. So to answer your question before, the average is 7 to 9 hours. There are people that can do 6, and a lot of it is genetic. And there are specific genes that he talks about in this book that you can get tested to see, are you one of these people that can get by on that little amount of sleep. But some people need, 9 or 10 hours. Anything over that, it can actually become suboptimal. You can damage your health if you sleep too much. Now, there are exceptions to that. Some very famous athletes sleep 12 hours a day, like Roger Federer, some basketball players, right? But the amount of energy that they're outputting in practice and in game is far more than the average person, and they need that sleep to restore. And so that's how they do it. But 8 hours of sleep every night, that is about what is recommended. So the problem is, you don't know how sleep deprived you are when you're sleep deprived, because your level of assessment and functioning is diminished. So make the connection, start to look at what your baseline is. So that's one of the big takeaways. Another takeaway is looking at some of the statistics and looking at the science to determine what is good practice for sleep. So here's a quote. When communicating science to the general public in lectures or writing, I'm always wary of bombarding an audience with never-ending mortality and morbidity statistics, lest they themselves lose the will to live in front of me. That's kind of funny. It is hard not to do so with such compelling masses of studies in the field of sleep deprivation. Often, however, a single astonishing result is all the people need to apprehend the point. For cardiovascular health, and so this is the point, is about cardiovascular health and sleep. For cardiovascular health, I believe that finding comes from a global experiment in which 1.5 billion people are forced to reduce their sleep by 1 hour or less for a single night each year. It is very likely that you have been part of this experiment, otherwise known as daylight savings time. In the Northern Hemisphere, this blew me away. This is just like crazy. And I looked into it and it was like, oh my God, it's totally validated. In the Northern Hemisphere, the switch to daylight savings time in March results in most people losing an hour of sleep opportunity. Should you tabulate millions of daily hospital records, as researchers have, you discover that the seemingly trivial sleep reduction comes with a frightening spike in heart attacks the following day. Impressively, it works both ways. In the autumn, within the Northern Hemisphere, when the clocks move forward and we gain an hour of sleep opportunity, rates of heart attacks plummet the day after. A similar rise and fall relationship can be seen with the number of traffic accidents, proving that the brain, by the way of attention lapses and microsleeps, is just as sensitive as the heart to very small perturbations of sleep. Most people think nothing of losing an hour of sleep for a single night, believing it to be trivial and inconsequential. It is anything but. I mean, this book is filled with an insane amount of statistics to take sleep a lot more seriously. So heart attack spike, the death, mortality of car accidents among teenagers, among children increases by, or decreases if you increase the amount of sleep that they get. So why, start school at 7:50 is absurd. It should be starting school at 9. And infant childhood mortality rates go down because of car accidents and all this other. So the impact of sleep is just, it's just nuts. So the statistics is alone, read this book just to get some of the statistics of sleep. Another big takeaway, digital technology, right? Here's a quote. A recent survey of over 1,500 American adults found that 90% of individuals regularly use some form of portable electronic device 60 minutes or less before bedtime. It has a very real impact on your melatonin release and thus ability to time the onset of sleep. One of the earliest studies found that using an iPad, an electronic tablet enriched with blue LED light for 2 hours prior to bed, blocked the otherwise rising levels of melatonin by a significant 23%. Most research goes several concerning steps further. Healthy adults lived for a 2-week period in a tightly controlled laboratory environment. The 2-week period was split in half, containing 2 different experimental arms that everyone passed through. 1, 5 nights of reading a book on an iPad for several hours before bed. No other iPad uses, such as email or internet, were allowed, so just reading a book. And 2, 5 nights of reading a printed paper book for several hours before bed, with the 2 conditions randomized in terms of which the participants experience first or second. So it's randomized. Compared to reading a printed book, reading on an iPad suppresses melatonin releases by over 50% at night. Indeed, an iPad reading delayed the rise of melatonin by up to 3 hours relative to the natural rising the same individuals experience when reading a printed book. When reading on the iPad, their melatonin peak, and thus instruction to sleep did not occur until the early morning hours rather than before midnight. Unsurprisingly, individuals took longer to fall asleep after iPad reading relative to print copy reading. Kind of some pretty big implications of this. I mean, I would guarantee that most of you who are listening to this have a phone on in your face before you go to sleep. It's probably the last thing you do. I mean, and not just
I
like
bet a lot of people just lay in bed for a little while.
They just lay in bed. That's my wife every night. She's sitting there with the phone, just like reading. She's just reading emails or catching up on this or that or whatever, reading the news. So that's a pretty big thing. And I think, the rates of childhood sleep disorders are like through the roof in the last 14 years. Well, what's happened in the last 14 years? iPhones, iPads, devices. Yeah, we've always had laptops, but most people don't sit with a laptop in their lap when they're trying to go to sleep. But an iPad is easy. So there is something, I mean, they're doing a lot more research on this, and they're going to find that these things are like the worst, the worst. So
I wonder about like a Kindle, as far as, because it's a different
blue
type
light.
of,
I mean, you could
lighting.
use blue light locking.
But either way, it's still an electronic
still
device.
blue light emitting devices. You could use. I have blue light glasses that I'll use if I just have to be on a device.
How old is this book? Do you know?
2 years.
Oh, so it's
Yeah,
real recent.
it's very new. Yeah. And so another, I guess, big takeaway is, 3,400,000 years versus 100 years. So here's a quote: within the space of a mere 100 years, human beings have abandoned their biologically mandated need for adequate sleep, which is really a result of artificial light. That screwed everything up, is the invention of the light bulb. It's some great things, but it wrecked a lot of things. So okay. Within the space of a mere 100 years, human beings have abandoned their biologically mandated need for adequate sleep, one that evolution spent 3,400,000 years perfecting in service of light support functions. As a result, the decimation of sleep throughout the industrialized nations is having a catastrophic impact on our health, our life expectancy, our safety, our productivity, and the education of our children. This silent sleep loss epidemic is the greatest public health challenge we face in the 21st century in developed nations. If we wish to avoid the suffocating effects of sleep neglect, the premature death it inflicts, and the sickening health it invites, a radical shift in our personal, cultural, professional, and societal appreciation of sleep must occur. I believe it is time for us to reclaim our right to a full night of sleep without embarrassment or the damaging stigma of laziness. In doing so, we can be reunited with the most powerful elixir of wellness and vitality, dispensing through every conceivable biological pathway. Then we may remember what it feels like to be truly awake during the day, infused with the deepest plenitude of being. That's his final piece on the book. Really impactful. And what I take away from that, like the big takeaway is for me, is this idea of being tough. And maybe that's because I'm like a guy, and as pilots, we're taught, like, just disrupt your circadian, don't get any sleep, tough it out, don't call fatigue unless you just don't really want to be there, or you're pissed at the airline. Like, don't use 117 because it might make you kind of a wimp. And that is just, I've completely shifted my thinking in the last decade on this. Is there's nothing tough or smart or more stamina or resiliency by getting less sleep. It makes you lazy, it makes you stupid, and it makes you sick by not getting sleep. Just like having a poor diet makes you fat, dumb, and lazy. Well, not having sleep makes you it just makes you ineffective and sick and stupid. So you got to defend your sleep with, like your life depends on it, because, well, apparently it does.
What would you say was the biggest single surprise that something you just didn't expect in there? Something you already said, or something?
The stats were disturbing, like alarming, absolutely alarming. Like safety statistics. I'm a human factors person. That's my, I'm always looking at safety statistics. The safety implications of starting school early, of not getting good sleep, teenagers being on iPads all night, or having their phones in their room, is like, there's mortality associated with it.
With those stats, did they, I get the difference between a first world and a third world. But
Yeah.
within the first world, was there any breakout of cultural, or different nationalities? European?
I didn't get into that. No, it was more just like developed nation that has access to iPads and devices. And the idea is, if I know there's studies, epidemiological studies on socioeconomic class and devices. And what they found is there's no difference in usage of devices, whether you have money or you don't. If you have a device, you're going to be addicted to it, because these devices do stuff in your brain that makes you addicted. That's a whole nother podcast, but there is digital addiction. It's a pandemic. I mean, drive around. Just here's what I want all my listeners to do, and send me emails confirming this. You probably see it all the time anyways, but drive around and notice how many people have their phone in their face while they're driving. Or when they're at a stoplight, they immediately take get the crack hit of looking at the phone. As soon as they hit the stoplight, phone comes up.
They don't have to be at the stoplight. They'll do it while they're driving.
Right. They're doing it while they're driving, but watch, it's everybody. It's everybody. And like from a safety perspective, I'm like, I want fully autonomous cars because people do not pay attention. And they are, you can tell which accident was like a technological device related accident. It's like, oh, a 4-car pileup in the middle of nothing, because somebody had their face in their phone and people are dying because of it. Do you want your loved one to die because somebody had to look at their text? They need to crack down on this so hard. And if you're driving around looking at your phone, you should not be doing that. You as pilots, don't tell me we can multitask. Then why do they have 2 of us up there and why do we use automation? Don't give me that. It doesn't exist. And if you're driving around looking at your phone, you are risking killing somebody. And that person is somebody's everything. So put your phones away. I'm begging you, put your phones away. It's not worth it. And try to improve your sleep. But that was the big piece for me was the statistics was just like, oh my God, this is horrible. This is just awful what we've done and what we're doing to our kids.
Just out of curiosity, was there anything in there that you kind of go, I don't buy that? Or was it all just made so much common sense?
I mean, I'm always like, look, what I like about reading, and look, if you're like anti-science or something, you think it's all fixed, I can't help you. Science is what we got. It's not perfect. It's, and science changes. Okay. That's the whole point is it changes just like an FOM, right? You get more information and it changes. Right. So, but what I like is Walker is a scientist, a very respected hardcore scientist, and he uses double-blind randomized controlled trials. Like, they're using real science and scientific method to get to these. He does not look at voodoo or anecdotal stuff. He looks at the hard science of sleep, and there's a plethora of studies out there. So what I think, I think it's always evolving. I don't think, oh my God, we've got it. We know. No, he wouldn't claim that. Science is always evolving. So you always got to look at things through the lens of this is an evolution. But there are trends. And, if you're paying attention, you start to realize, okay, there's probably something here to this as it evolves. So nothing in there was like, oh, come on, this is crazy. I mean, I think when you're reading something on this or we're talking about sleep, it tends to put this message out of like, oh my God, this is the most important thing ever, which is not true. We're just focusing on the task. And if you take everything at, to heart in here, you'll feel like you're going to die if you don't get 8 hours of sleep, which is just not true. But I think it's the long-term effects you want to be looking at, that over time, this can really hurt you. But, don't get crazy and scared. I mean, some nights you're going to have a shitty night of sleep, and sometimes you just can't get that amount of sleep because you've got things to do. And I get that, but it's that do a little, a lot, don't do a lot, a little kind of attitude toward your sleep, I think makes a long-term difference.
On one of our previous episodes, we had said that we were going to kind of do maybe even a whole podcast episode on the effects of pain and its effects on sleep. Did he talk anything about pain?
There's mentions of pain and how it affects sleep. Yeah, it's a little bit talked in there. It's talking there, but we can talk about that maybe next time. We'll
it's a little bit probably too in depth, and it's a little in depth. Going to be a shorter episode today.
So anyways, that's it. That's why we sleep. You don't have to go read it now unless you want to get dorky on it. But those are the big takeaways, at least that I pulled from it. So
we'll be doing more of these on a occasional basis, because we've been asked multiple times by people recently about these book reviews. So every now and then we'll just interject one in and just kind of make it about a different subject.
Yep.
Anything else you want to throw in for today?
I think we covered it. We'll let people go.
Yep. This is one of the shortest episodes we've had.
Yeah.
But still, I thought it was sleep is important. I mean, and I think we don't give it enough. We don't look at it and we just kind of dismiss it and say it's not a big deal when it, like you said, it really is.
Yep.
Once again, thanks for listening. Please give a thumbs up, a like, keep spreading the word about the LiftAffect podcast. If you want to send in a question or a comment, it's podcast at LiftAffect.com. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
Have a good week, everybody. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the LiftAffect podcast. If you want to dive deeper into this episode and every episode, go to our website, liftaffect.com/podcast. If you're enjoying the show, we would love it if you'd follow us on Spotify and rate, review, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts. We really appreciate your support. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, all with the ID Matthew McNeil. This show is brought to you by LiftAffect, a clinical mental health and consulting company that assists air carriers, corporate flight departments, pilot unions, and commercial pilots by providing comprehensive psychotherapy and mental skills coaching services to pilots with mental health and mental performance-related issues. Visit LiftAffect.com, that's LiftAffect.com, to book your free consultation. And finally, this podcast is for general informational purposes only. It does not constitute the practice of counseling, psychotherapy, medicine, or any other healthcare service, including the giving of medical advice. No therapeutic or provider-patient relationship is formed. The use of this information and any materials linked to this podcast is at the user's own risk. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining advice for any psychological or medical condition they have, and they should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on the LiftAffect podcast.